So round 8 out of 11 of the FIDE Grand Swiss tournament has officially concluded. It was a bit of a quiet day for some and a louder day for others. We're going to be going over the Divya versus Gash game. Pretty historic game in my opinion. And we're going to be discussing the standings as of now. So a lot of the top boards drew, including Matthias and Nihal Sarin. Good news for the people with 5.5. They're still just half a point out from first. Notable wins at the top were Vincent Keimer. He took down Vidit Gujarati. Hans did draw Faruja, so I do believe Hans will be one of the two finalists at the top two. Levon Aronian lost to Yegiz Erdogmis, so he's continuing a very fantastic tournament, the prodigy from Turkey. Other notable games were Richard Rapport failed to convert a winning position against Pragdananda. I was a little sad about that. That's not going to help Rapport's chances. He's a point behind with only 3 games to go. So we're going to go with Hans Niemann and Anish Giri. Those are going to be the final predictions for me, though Anish also failed to convert against Maksudlu. It was a pretty crazy game, but we're going to focus on Divya versus Gash today because this was a historic game. It's not all too often that a female draws a reigning world champion in a classical game of chess. It happened with Ding Liren versus Juing Ju. It happened with Judith Polgar, a draw in a classical game, but it's never happened to Divya. Divya's had an amazing year. She's only 2478 rated. She's up 20 points in this tournament. She took down Velimir Ivic. She drew Donchenko. She drew Gash now. Had a chance to win. That's the craziest part about this. And yeah, she became a GM in 2025. She's only 19 years old. She's like, Gash, my son, you're about to get sunned. And we're going to look into the game. We're going to see how it went down. It is a beautiful game. It's over 100 moves. Half the game we're going to skim through. The other half we're going to focus on a little more. So we get a Rosalimo played by Gash, bishop to b5, a very nice opening. We get pawn to e5, over solidifying d4, saying, hey, you're never going to be able to play d4 yourself. Gash opts to castle rather than double up the pawns. And we get bishop to e7, rook to e1, and it's a pretty calm opening. Knight to d4 in the center of the board. There's many ways white can play here. They can slide the bishop back to c4, aiming at f7. They can play it more in a calm manner with bishop to f1, or they could take the knight on d4, doubling up the pawns. Oh, by the way, we are officially starting a podcast next week. It's going to be happening once or twice a week, like 15 to 20 minutes, having nothing to do with chess. So I'm going to create another channel and podcasts. I know everybody's making podcasts. I'm going to be one of those dudes, but it's nice to be able to vent. People who enjoy my opinions, you can follow me there and it'll be no chess. It'll just be stuff on life. Whatever I find interesting. Quitting your job, maybe. Traveling. What to do with your life. How to deal with the loss of family, friends. It'll be just stuff like that. Stuff that I find interesting that I would enjoy to talk about. But back to the game. We got knight takes f3, queen takes f3. Does Gash see mate in 1? No, he doesn't. Or Divya rather. She goes a6 and gets... Just kidding. They're way too good for that. So knight f6. A great move deemed by the engine. Pretty crazy. Because she stopped checkmate in 1. We get pawn d3 castles. What is up with Gash, by the way? He's getting farmed. He's down like 20 points this tournament. Do you know how hard 20 points at the rating of 2790 to gain is? 2767 now. Knight c3 d6. Always reminds me of like a Benoni pawn structure, even though it isn't really. We get pawn to a4, good move. Expanding on the queen side with the pawn. Bishop to e6, a good move by Divya. What's the point of this move? Well, the point is if the bishop takes and the pawn takes, you justify the doubling of these pawns with the opening of the rook on the f file. Something like queen h3, tangible, targetable, weakness, but it's just going to be defended. The rooks are now connected. It doesn't seem so much that white has an attack. Right, even these routes, knight d1, knight e3, this e6 pawn, e pawn OP. E-pawn OP. We'll leave it at that. We get pawn to h3, queen to d7, a nice little battery over on the king side. Pawn to a4, gaining a little more space. And we get rook to d8. Suspicious. So Gukesh is a little bit better. Indeed, he is. He develops the bishop, okay. Pawn to h6, playing in a very Gukeshian way. And how should white play this? Well, in this position, white needs to go something of the sort of a6 or bishop to b5. Play on the queen side. Instead, Gukesh wastes a spring in the position over on the king side and gives up all of his relative advantage with the move pawn to f4. He let go of the spring, released the spring in the position. And why is this a mistake? Well, this is a mistake, and Divya plays very accurately here. You have to take, right, you know what, you get your light squared bishop squeeze in, and then go bishop to f6. You see, this bishop didn't know what to do. Didn't have too many good squares on the board. It had dreams and aspirations, and it got there. Good guy. Good gal. Bishop to f6. We get pawn to e5. We get taking again. Right now, black doesn't even have a backwards pawn. Gukesh is like, that's a strong bishop. Let me trade the bishops. The best move in this position is to maintain the pressure with bishop to h4. Right, g3, such a move would be hard to be played. You could double up their pawns, go back to f6, and argue that you weakened their king side. And the alternative is they move their rook and lose the doubling on the e-file, but she takes. I wonder if she was playing for a draw. You know, sometimes when you play for a draw, you end up losing. That's the double-edged sword of playing for a draw. Because you need, you know, if one person wants to win, one person wants to win. We got queen to d4 check. A trading up, right? This is just not many fireworks in the position. Trying to trade into... How could she have possibly gotten winning chances in this position? I'm sorry, as a world champion with the white pieces in this position, you should almost never result in a losing position. We make mistakes. Who am I to talk? But this is crazy that she got winning chances from this position. Okay, a6, good move, pressing. Though this pawn is 2 away from queening. This could be a strength, but it could also be a liability. Right, because it's a blockaded pawn. You trade off light squared bishops, then all of a sudden your rook is just tied down to your a pawn, and it could be easily targeted. So this pawn that could be used as a strength or viewed as a strength is also a liability. Hey, Gukesh is going back in the position. He went knight back to d2. He went the wrong way. He had to go knight to g3 rather. But okay, we get this. She trades off the light squared bishop. Rook's on the 7th, so his rook can't get on the 7th. Defends a7. Consolidating. He repeats the position, no draw. Knight to c7, see what I mean? Now, all of a sudden, she has the better end of the endgame because he's the one tied down to a tangible target. Rook to c8, fantastic chess. She's just tying down white's pieces. This is very good chess. Respect to Divya. I mean, at 19 years old, she's had a fantastic 2025. Big things for her. Pawn to b5, the knight moves, rook to d6. Look at this pawn is going to fall. It's not so simple. It's not like he could just go here, because look at this. Rook takes c2, and she infiltrates on the second rank. Better would even be rook f6 first. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. And even though white is temporarily up a pawn, that's not how this will end. There's too many threats in the midst, in the position. Gukesh would need to be careful. So he doesn't take on b5. He goes king d2, okay, guarding c2. She picks up a pawn. He slides back. She's temporarily up a pawn, but she goes pawn to b4. I guess she didn't want to lose this guy. What would you do in this position? The correct move is rook to g6, aiming at the pawn over here on g2. It induces the move pawn to g4, saving the structure, but not by too much. Rook to e6, and she's just not going to win this pawn. F takes e6, she's not going to win the pawn. This is almost a healthy pawn that she's up. But okay, b4. He has counterplay. She goes for a rook trade. I believe she just wanted a draw at this point, but she gets winning chances again. Gukesh cannot escape it. Rook takes pawn, rook f2, entering the second rank. She picks off a pawn. She gets pinned. She does not lose her knight. Rook to a8, king to e7. Picks up another pawn, and now we have this position where it's a 3-on-1 versus a 3-on-1, but Gukesh's pawns are weaker. So he trades one off. Now it's a 2-on-0 against a 3-on-1. But why is she better? She's better because she has the move and he loses a pawn. Now it's a 3-on-0 versus a 2-on-0. She's just up a healthy pawn. We get king t8. You might be like, does he take? He actually does not take. We get rook to b6. Find the winning move here. Very surprised she did not play it. The winning move is pawn to g6. Point is, you'd have to move the knight. She would move the king. Give a check. King d7. Knight back to d6. And you can play this in an assortment of ways. Maybe the best being to hold on to the pawn. And you just have a passer. In fact, Gukesh's best move in this position is to give up the knight. That's what's so crazy. It's to give up the knight, take on g6, and hold this. Right? Without this pawn, okay. Rook and knight versus rook and 2. With this pawn, I don't think this is so tangible. This is a very good pawn. It would be very complex. She would be the one playing for a win. But for some reason, after the move rook to b6, she went knight to e6, check, and then did not go pawn to g6. This was the last chance. Go pawn to g6. She went here, but now it's an unwinnable position, and in fact, it's scary for black. Your pawns get split, and even though you pick up a pawn, your pawns are split. So maybe she was settling on a draw, but this was not the way to do it. Okay, she takes a pawn because that's a passed pawn. That could be annoying. She trades down into a theoretically drawn endgame. Even without the pawn, this is a draw. She showed good technique here, good Dvoretsky endgames, where she just avoided getting checkmated, farmed a bunch of great moves from the world champion. And yeah, at this level, this is just easy. So just playing through the moves, 103 moves. They agreed to a draw. Divya is having not the tournament of her life, actually. She just had, where she got the GM title, she took down everyone. But to draw a reigning world champion, big respect. Hopefully in the future she'll win a reigning champion. Beat, rather. A long career ahead. Thank you as always for watching. Who do you think's going to win? Have a great day. Peace.